Hi and welcome to this Caffeine security video about securing free workspaces on Slack. So today we'll look at two-factor authentication for protecting the accounts that people use to connect to your Slack, different permissions that applications might request. We'll talk about making links more private as well as preventing people from accidentally sharing attachments publicly. We'll talk about controlling invitations and the display of email addresses in your Slack. So first, log in as an administrator to your Slack workspace on the web. You'll see on the top left that you can choose administration and then workspace settings. Two-factor authentication is really important, especially for something like Slack that stores historical messages, because you don't want a single person's password to be phished and for that to lead to a complete compromise of all the messages you still have in your Slack. So in the administration portal, you'll want to go to the Authentication tab right here, and you'll enable workspace-wide two-factor authentication. As we expand that, we see the Activate two-factor authentication for my workspace button, and then you're asked if you want to customize the message that users will receive. So right here, I'm logged in as the administrator. I won't change the message. I'll just activate two-factor authentication. So now, as you can see, on September 22nd, it's going to be required. So now you can go to Manage Members and you see the accounts that are there. And as you can see, their authentication is still the default. It's not at two-factor. However, the users have received a message telling them that two-factor authentication will now be required. And on there's a button to configure two-factor authentication using an app or SMS. I recommend using an app because it's more convenient, it doesn't require cellular connectivity, and it is also more secure. Integrating Slack to apps is very useful. However, apps require access to data that's stored in Slack, so you may not want everyone who has access to your Slack workspace to be able to install any app. So if you go to the Configure Apps page, then go to the Permissions tab. So what we'll want to enable is approved apps. Basically, that is a whitelist of apps that are pre-approved that are going to be usable on your workspace. So we'll enable that. But you can't guess in advance what apps people will want, so you may want to allow members to request additions to approved apps and to require that they provide a comment when they request approving a new application. I also recommend enabling only allow apps from the Slack app directory. That way, third-party apps that people will run on different systems will not be able to access your Slack. So enable that unless you have a very specific need. Now, if we go back to the main administration portal, there's a few settings that are worth checking. Hide your workspace URL from external sites logs. So when we click a link on the web, typically the other website will know what site or page referred the user to them. So for example, if you're reading a newspaper's website and you click on a link to caffeinesecurity.com, we're able to see which newspaper sent you to caffeinesecurity.com. So because your Slack workspace name is a subdomain, people running websites can see if you're clicking on their links. So for example, they might be able to guess that, oh, there's a lot of people at that company looking at our website today. Or, oh, people from that newspaper are looking at our site. Right now, by default, that's enabled, so you can leave it. But if you have an older Slack workspace, be sure to go double check that it's enabled. Then another really important thing to check is the workspace sign-up mode. So if we expand that, we can see who can sign up for this Slack right here. So you can either limit it to one or multiple domains, or you could even make it invitation only. If it's a company Slack, I would highly recommend that you put your domain or domains in there so people could sign up really easily without an invitation. But in some cases, if it's even more restricted, you definitely want it to be invitation only. And if you do end up using invitation only, make sure you also go in the Permissions tab and configure who's allowed to send invitations. Make sure that this is not checked, otherwise anyone in a group will be able to invite new members, and that might not be what you want. So if we go back to that Permissions tab again and we scroll down, we see there's an option called Public File Sharing. that simply controls whether people can create a public file URL for any attachment sent to Slack. So for example, if you store the document in Slack and you want to be able to send a link to it to anyone, even including people that are not in the Slack, this needs to be enabled. In many cases, though, people are using Slack only to collaborate with other people within Slack, and then you'll definitely want to disable that. That way you won't be able to accidentally share a file with the entire internet. And then the last thing we're going to check right here is email display. In some cases, people are running really big Slack workspaces with a lot of people that may or may not know each other. So in this case, you should not display email addresses. That way, people won't be able to contact each other directly out of Slack without prior acknowledgement. Now, if you have the paid version, I would highly recommend that you spend some time with the identities. So if you're already using G Suite or Active Directory, leverage that so people can log in using the same policies you already have in place and without having one more password to remember. And retention policies. We have a lot of channels in Slack that we don't need to keep forever. The information in there is either only good for a short period of time, or it's a random channel with random discussion. We don't want that to be archived because everything that gets retained could be stolen at some point. So if there's a channel that is only useful for 1 week, just set a retention policy on it so comments made the week before are deleted. In that way, if that Slack is ever compromised, there's a limited amount of information in there for anyone to access. Thank you for watching this Caffeine security video. If you'd like more videos on how to secure technology, be sure to subscribe to our channel. For more detailed information about securing technology in a written format, be sure to follow us on Twitter or subscribe to our blog. And for more in-depth content, subscribe to our channel on Pluralsight and get a free 10-day trial. Thank you.